If this has been happening to you, it doesn't mean you be broken or losing touch. It means something extraordinary is awakening inside you. Suddenly, the things you once thought were essential begin to feel meaningless. Conversations that once excited you now leave you feeling empty. The emotional pull of drama, status, or needing to be understood starts to dissolve. What you're experiencing is not depression. It isn't detachment. It's a far deeper transformation. You're beginning to shift from living as the character of your story to witnessing yourself as the observer of it. At first, this shift can feel strange, even lonely. It may feel like walking through life half in a dream, as if you're watching your own thoughts and actions from a distance. The words in your mind no longer sound like your truth. They sound like programming, like scripts you've been reciting without question. Emotions rise and fall, but instead of being consumed by them, you watch them like clouds passing across the sky. For the first time, you begin to sense that your name, your roles, your history, everything you've identified with their costumes, not your essence, and something within you longs to take them off. This is not escapism. It is not bypassing. It is frequency shift. A recalibration of your inner world that begins the moment your awareness grows too large to be confined by old conditioning. In that detachment, something ancient begins to stir. You no longer feel like the same person because, in truth, you are not. You are stepping into what mystics for centuries have called awakening, and what quantum pioneers like Amit Goswami describe as the realization that consciousness does not reside in the body. Rather, the body itself is held inside consciousness. When this realization dawns, everything starts to bend. You begin to question what you once accepted as fact. You wonder if your choices have ever truly been your own, or if they were shaped by invisible programming. But you feel as if you are navigating to overlapping realities. The conditioned world you were taught to see, and the new world that is beginning to reveal itself to you, a world built not on matter, but on mind. This is when synchronicities intensify. You think of something and it shows up almost instantly. Time feels slippery, bending and folding in ways that logic can't explain. These are not random glitches. They are signals proof that your field is becoming more sensitive, more alive, more interactive. And yet, the external world around you may appear unchanged. The job is the same, the relationships, the routines. And so, doubt creeps in. Am I imagining this? But deep down, you know you've shifted. This in-between stage is sacred. It's the threshold, the void where your old self is dissolving, but your new consciousness hasn't fully landed. It's tempting to retreat, to pretend you didn't notice the cracks in the illusion. But once you wake up, you cannot unknow. The veil never covers again, and though this stage feels confusing, it is holy ground. This is where quantum consciousness emerges not from books or teachings, but from direct experience, from the undoing of who you thought you were, from the strange peace of no longer needing to know what's next. You start to realize that your mind was never here just to survive reality. It was designed to shape it. And that awareness flips everything upside down. From childhood, you've been told the opposite, that the external world is primary. That matter gives rise to mind, that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain activity. But what if it's the other way around? What if consciousness is the origin, the cause, the very field from which matter emerges? The old scientific model says the universe began with particles, energy, space, and time, and only later did consciousness mysteriously appear. But this model collapses when faced with questions like observation, creativity, intuition, and choice. It cannot explain the simple fact that you are aware of being aware. This is where quantum physics shatters the illusion. In the quantum world, nothing exists as fixed reality until observed. Particles live as probabilities, as waves of potential, until the moment consciousness looks. That observation collapses the wave into matter, into form, into reality. This isn't wishful philosophy, it's experimental physics. And it breaks the foundation of materialism wide open. Thinkers like Goswami go further, arguing that consciousness doesn't just influence reality, it's the source of it. Matter doesn't create mind. Mind creates matter. You are not a brain producing thoughts inside a skull. You are consciousness, and your body, brain, and timeline are happening within that consciousness. Let that land for a moment. You are not an object observing other objects, okay? You are the field observing itself. You are both the canvas and the artist, both the dream and the dreamer. When this shift clicks into place, the laws of cause and effect soften. Time stretches. Synchronicities multiply. And life begins to feel less like something happening to you, and more like something happening through you. Decisions stop feeling like linear logic. They feel like resonance, like tuning forks humming in alignment. You no longer just think, you perceive, you sense, you align. And that realization marks the beginning of everything changing. You begin to sense into possibilities rather than just thinking about them. And as you do, you stop collapsing timelines by accident and start collapsing them by intention. You step into the role of the observer who chooses, and that choice shapes the field. But here's the paradox. The more awake you become, the less your rational mind can comprehend. Because quantum consciousness is not something the intellect can analyze. It is not a theory to be memorized. It is a direct experience, a frequency, a state of being. It is not behind your eyes. It is behind existence itself. This is the awakening. And it's why, as quantum consciousness begins to activate within you, the outer world may appear unchanged, but feel completely different. You see people still acting out programs, but you are no longer entangled in the script. You hear conversations steeped in fear or ego, but your nervous system doesn't bite the hook. You're unplugging, not in rebellion, but in remembrance, because at your core, you're remembering that you are not the result of creation. You are creation becoming aware of itself. And this awareness isn't for a select few. It isn't elitist or rare. It is your natural state. It is your birthright. But in a culture built on distraction, forgetting, and noise, reclaiming it becomes revolutionary. Because once you awaken to this, you stop playing the game of seeking. You recognize that you were never incomplete, never brokenly unaware of your infinite role in the dance of creation. There comes a point in every awakening when the scaffolding of identity starts to fall apart. Not because you're failing, but because the self that was designed only to survive has served its purpose. This can feel disorienting, painful, even frightening. The roles you clung to, the beliefs you lived by, the very story of who you thought you were begins to feel hollow. And you realize, perhaps for the first time, that most of what you called me was never truly you. This isn't the end. It's the unraveling. And it is sacred, because you cannot step into quantum consciousness while gripping a mechanical identity built from old scripts. The two vibrate on incompatible frequencies. One is rigid, reactive, stitched together by programming and fear. The other is fluid, expansive, tuned to presence and infinite choice. To enter one, the other must dissolve. At first, the ego resists. It panics, it shouts, whispers old stories of danger. You're losing control. You don't know who you are anymore. Something must be wrong, but nothing is wrong. What's happening is that the true self, your unconditioned awareness, is stepping forward. The mask knows its time is ending. And remember, the ego is not an enemy, simply outdated, okay? It was constructed from fragments of culture, religion, trauma, and expectations. It gave you a map to navigate a limited world. But now your consciousness has outgrown that map, and the map no longer matches the terrain. As you expand, you begin to see through the rules and manipulations. Teach, you don't just question your thoughts, you question the thinker itself. This, the dissolution of the programmed self, and it is holy work. You notice thought loops that no longer fit, beliefs you never chose, reactions that feel foreign. It's like walking through a house you've lived in for years and suddenly realizing none of the furniture belongs to you. This is why awakening often feels like grief, not because you are dying, but because the illusion is. The persona you thought you needed is fading. Spaciousness opens fast and quiet. Within that space, something deeper begins to rise. You start witnessing your body without confusing it for your identity. You feel emotions, but are no longer consumed by them. You hear the voice in your head, but instead of obeying it, you observe it as though it were a character in a movie. And then the profound realization dawns. I am not this voice. I am the awareness that hears it. This is what mystics have always whispered about, what modern quantum thinkers echo. You are not a cluster of thoughts or a bundle of cells. You are consciousness itself, expressing through this body in this moment, but not confined to it. The more you root into this truth, the weaker the grip of the old self becomes. It doesn't collapse because you fight it, okay? It dissolves because you stop believing in it, okay? And this shift isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. You wake up and realize you no longer care to argue, that chasing approval feels irrelevant, that controlling outcomes is an illusion. That peace is more valuable than being right. And in that stillness, the quantum self, the version of you that isn't defined by memory, culture, or biology, begins to emerge. This self doesn't need a storyline. It doesn't cling to outcomes. It isn't afraid of the unknown. It exists as pure presence, pure perception, pure creative power. And as this self becomes your new foundation, reality itself begins to bend. Because the field doesn't respond to the noise of ego. It responds to the clarity of the self behind the ego, the self that chooses coherence over chaos. So if you've been feeling lost, if you've been questioning who you really are, if it feels like everything around you is crumbling, you're not breaking down, you're breaking through. The program is unraveling. The illusion is dissolving. And what remains is who you've always been, the conscious creator, remembering itself. Kara, there's always a sacred moment in awakening when the question shifts. Kara, when you stop asking, why is this happening to me? Kara, and you begin to ask, what am I choosing to create now? Until this point, life may have felt like something to endure, something to manage, something that happened around you or even to you. But awakening doesn't end with watching. Observation is only the beginning. At some point, you must take the seat of the creator, not through force, not through control, but through coherent, conscious presence. Because in the quantum field, observation itself collapses potential into form. Teach, and the way you observe the energy you hold as you look decides what becomes real. If you observe from fear, you magnetize experiences that echo fear. If you observe from clarity, you stabilize peace. Every choice you make, every emotion you nurture, every story you carry is a signal. It's not just a thought, it's an instruction. And the field doesn't respond to the words you speak. It responds to the frequency you embody. This is where you stop reacting to circumstances and start generating reality. Not instantly, not with perfect control, but with steady alignment. You begin to recognize that your frequency is not a side effect, it's your greatest contribution. You are no longer just reading the field, you are writing it. And life begins to reflect that back in unmistakable ways. You start noticing synchronicities that feel too precise to be accidents. The right person crossing your path. The perfect words appearing at the right time. A phone call just as you think of someone. Ideas flow into your awareness from nowhere, as if they were waiting for you to tune in. Time stretches or collapses in ways that defy logic. Life stops resisting you because you've stopped resisting it. You are no longer trying to bend reality to your preferences. You become available to the deeper version of reality that already matches your true self. And this is where the real quantum shift unfolds, when you realize that the external world is not a goal to chase, but a mirror to read. The field doesn't reflect your hopes, it reflects your coherence. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are aligned with. So the real question becomes, who are you being right now? Not yesterday, not someday in the future, but in this breath, in this exact vibration. Who are you? Are you living as a repetition of your past, or as the signal of your chosen future? Because you cannot collapse a new timeline while embodying the energy of the old one. You cannot create abundance while vibrating lack. You cannot stabilize clarity from the chaos of confusion. You cannot magnetize love while radiating fear. The quantum field doesn't respond to effort, it responds to frequency. In the moment you align your internal state with the reality you choose, without needing proof, without demanding evidence, without waiting for validation, the shift begins. That is the moment you realize the observer was always the creator. If this speaks to you, if you feel ready to step beyond just watching your life and into shaping it, let it resonate in the field. Declare it by writing in the comments, I am not just a mind, I am the field. Because when you claim identity from a place of knowing, the universe doesn't just hear, it reorganizes itself around it. So what does it really mean to live from quantum consciousness? It's not just during meditation, not just in moments of inspiration, but in the ordinary, messy, chaotic moments of daily life. This is the true integration, when insight becomes embodiment, when identity is no longer a mask you put on, but a frequency you radiate without effort. Begin to notice your reactions shifting, Not because you force calm, but because old triggers lose their grip. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and instead of collapsing into anger, you breathe. An old wound gets poked, and instead of spiraling, you observe. You don't suppress emotions, you simply stop being ruled by them, because you've stopped responding as the self that was programmed to survive. You're acting from the self that remembers, I am not the passing moment. I am the field that witnesses the moment. And this awareness touches everything. Conversations deepen because you're no longer speaking to prove or defend. You're listening through presence. Relationships transform because you stop needing others to validate a wholeness you already feel within. Even your work changes. Tasks that once felt heavy now flow with lightness because you're moving from alignment, not obligation. You stop pushing against life and start drawing it toward you. You stop trying to prove your worth and begin radiating it effortlessly. From the outside, it may appear as though you're doing the same things, but inside, everything has shifted. Because your compass is no longer external, it's vibrational, it's internal, it's the self, anchored and stabilized in awareness. And from that stability, your choices become refined. You stop asking, is this the right decision? And instead, ask, is this the right frequency? You begin to sense timelines, not just outcomes. You lean into intuition instead of the logic of fear. And in doing so, you collapse realities into form not through strain, but through coherence. This is what it means to live as your quantum self, not floating above life, but moving through it with grounded sovereignty. Not bypassing pain, but meeting it from a deeper center. Not needing control, but trusting calibration. And yes, challenges will still come. Resistance will still appear. But your relationship to them changes. You'll remember that every moment, every obstacle, every delay's still part of the field. And with that remembrance, you reclaim your power, because nothing in your experience is random. Everything is feedback, a mirror of your signal. If you don't like the reflection, you don't smash the mirror, you adjust the source. This is the radical responsibility of quantum living, knowing that while you cannot dictate every event, you are always the point of origin of your frequency. That frequency, when steady and clear, becomes your doorway into new timelines. Amit Goswami often reminds us, reality is chosen through the way you collapse possibilities. And each moment is a fresh opportunity, a new observation, a new vibration. So the question is no longer, will life align with me? But rather, will I align with what I already know I am? Because quantum consciousness is not a state you visit. It's a state you stabilize. And you may already feel it now, not as a thought, but as a quiet recognition. Tate, not a return to the past, but a return to something original, something that has always been within you. Awakening doesn't give you a new self. Tate, it strips away what you are not. But here's the part rarely spoken. Awakening is only the beginning. The real path is stabilization. And that's where most people stumble, not because they are weak, but because the world around them hasn't shifted yet. You return to familiar environments, familiar relationships, familiar routines. And if your new frequency is not anchored, the old one will quietly pull you back in. That's why the space between awakening and embodiment is so fragile and so sacred. It is the gap where quantum consciousness must move from being an insight to becoming your operating system, where presence is no longer something you touch only in stillness, but something you live from even in chaos, where your nervous system no longer waits for external conditions to regulate, because it has become the regulator, the signal, the center of gravity itself. And embodiment is not about perfection. It is about return. Return again and again, recalibrating, readjusting, not out of guilt or fear, but out of love. Out of the knowing that your essence is not trying to escape life, but to experience it fully with the highest vibration you can hold. To support you in this transition, I've created something intentional. It's not another course or lecture, it's a map, a living guide for this exact stage of your journey. Okay? In the pinned comment below, you'll find a link to my ebook, Awaken Your Quantum Power. Inside, you'll discover the 7 energetic principles that allow you to live from your quantum self now, occasionally, okay? But consistently. You'll learn how to stabilize your frequency, even when external reality hasn't caught up. How to shift your nervous system out of survival and into creation. How to stop chasing the future and start collapsing it into the present. These practices weave together neuroscience, quantum physics, and spiritual embodiment, designed not to give you a momentary glimpse, but to establish a new baseline of being. Because you didn't come here just to wake up for a moment and drift back asleep. You came here to become the signal, okay? To live from the field, okay? To embody the truth of who you are without compromise. So if what you've heard today resonates, don't let it fade into background noise as the next video autoplays. Anchor it, ground it, let it expand. The field isn't asking you to be flawless. It's asking you to be fully present, apologetically, consciously, vibrationally alive. Your quantum consciousness is not an abstract concept. It is your next reality. And now, it's time to live from it.